So here we are, and we're going to look at case study 3.1 or case 3.1. It's Kello versus the city of New London. This was a case that was built upon the takings clause of the Constitution, or what we call eminent domain. And it's based the city of New London, which is a Connecticut city. And it was a landmark 2005 Supreme Court case. And it was whether or not a city could use the power of eminent domain to seize private property, transfer it to another private party for economic development. The city of New London was a city that had fallen on some very hard times. They had lost a lot of their industry. It was like a lot of cities during that early 2000 period that were the economy was up and down, up and down, up and down. And there were some issues that came out of that later on. We had the cases with the subprime mortgage scandals and what all went on in there, the 08, 09 era, where we ended up getting some of our acts that protect businesses and protect individuals from bad actors when it comes to that. But this case from 2005 really took a strong look at what the public use meant for eminent domain. It is stated that anything used that's taking through the takings clause is meant for public use. Now, what is public use? According to the Supreme Court, disqualified. They were looking at it, and the litigants in the case, one of the main ones being Suzette Kello, they wanted to stop their property from being taken. And the way they were doing it was to argue that the city was not taking it for public use. They were giving it to this private company that was coming in. And so it was not being taken to make a road or a school or a park or anything like that, but what should have been considered a private development. In their majority opinion, 5-4, the court ruled that the city's actions did not violate that Fifth Amendment public use clause, that it could be interpreted broadly as public purpose and not so much just use. One of the times where they look at how the Constitution was written and they say, okay, let's look at it a little bit wider here. And that does happen from time to time. We all are pretty well versed in that. They stated that economic development that could create jobs, increase tax revenues was considered a valid public use, even if the property went to those private developers. The justices who dissented, and don't have all their names listed in here, but the dissent argued that the interpretation gave way too much power to government entities, risk abuse, especially to anyone who's a vulnerable property owner. They believe that public use should be more narrowly defined to prevent the takings clause from benefiting private companies in that way. So it was, a decision that was real close and at 5-4, and how they found in favor of the city of New Connecticut. When you look at these, and this is not based solely upon the question you're answering, it's based upon this case in general, what I'm going over here. So I'm not answering the question for you. I just want to kind of look at some of the, ethical theories that are in the book so far. 3 of those are utilitarianism, libertarianism, and Rawlsian justice. They would look at it from each one of their standpoints, and all 3 of these, although they differ in their main objectives, they would see that wrong was perpetrated by their basis against these citizens. Utilitarianism would support eminent domain if the overall happiness, economic and social benefits outweighs the suffering of those displaced. So they would look at the suffering in this. Utilitarianism would look at what happened, the overall what was coming. Now, there wasn't foresight here, so we have to keep in mind we know what happened, what the end of the story is here, but we do not have the foresight when we look at the utilitarianism and how it would apply to this. Now, if we take into account the whole thing where the company that was supposed to come in eventually did not come in, likely because of the court cases, then we would see that utilitarianism would say, okay, well, this did not benefit anyone. There was not a benefit here at all. Libertarianism would oppose takings because it takes away the individual liberty, individual rights of those who own the property. Libertarianism, no matter the outcome, is going to be against it in basis, not in every case, but in basis because of the fact that it's taken away those rights. And then Rawlsian justice would only support eminent domain if it clearly benefits the least advantaged, not just the average or the majority. And we could truly say that a large company, probably not the least advantaged, and the people who were going to be able to take advantage of what was being done were those who would come with the company had they came in and been able to live in the homes that were going to be built and whatever they were going to use that property for. Despite the ruling, though, that planned development never happened. It was all going to be a planned development. New London was going to build a whole new area for that company to come in. It did not ever come in. It failed to materialize. That land remained vacant for many years afterwards, and the economic benefits never came to fruition. So the whole public use, go back to this, that whole public use and term and public purpose was never there. It never happened because of what went on. It sparked a public backlash. And many states began to pass laws restricting the use of eminent domain for economic development. Most of us have probably seen what goes on with it. I don't know if any of you have ever been personally affected by it, but in the area I live in, we had a bypass put in that went around the small town that's the county seat here in Bradford County that we start. And a bypass went around. They diverted 301 to a certain extent. And they went through a lot of property, and that was eminent domain cases that had to be handled. And what eminent domain, the goal of it is if they take the property, they pay what would be considered a fair market value. It's not the exact way it reads, but that's what it's getting at, a fair market value. Now, fair market value doesn't always mean fair value. Market at the time may not be fair to the person whose property is being taken. And so it's a lot of things that have to be weighed. The question that has to be answered for the government to be able to do it, is there a true public use that's going to happen here, a true governmental need for this that's going to allow them to take this? When they make these decisions, there has to be those type of questions answered for them to be able to do it. The importance of this case in and of itself was the new definition it gave to the scope of public use in the Constitution. It allowed a broader definition of it. The reason states began to implement laws was because of that broader definition. So if the Supreme Court was going to give a broader definition, states said, well, what we'll do is narrow down the reasons we could possibly use it within our state. Now, does that stop the federal government from it? No, but it does take into consideration that states would not go into this, not all states, just the states who have changed. They all haven't changed. But this case does get cited when we think about ethical limits of eminent domain, the balance between that collective good and individual rights. And with ethics, one of the main goals of ethics and how ethics sit, especially in a business setting, is what are the ethical ways that a business does practice. So a municipality like the city of New London is a business. If they do not run it as a business, to a certain extent, it's not going to be able to move forward. They have to make sure they maintain a budget. They have to make sure they're bringing in revenue. So all those things are important to a city, and the same as they are to a business. But when we think about what goes into that and the ethics behind that, a lot of times it takes away from what could be considered individual rights. Collective good in a business is the good of its shareholders, its stakeholders. And sometimes not every stakeholder gets taken into consideration. In the case of New London, your stakeholders there were the city of New London, the citizens of New London, the business that was supposed to come in, and those individuals whose property was being taken. And so all the stakeholders involved there were not being treated equally because they were had a goal in mind that looked at what was going to be good for the most and not for everyone. And that is where, when you look at these ethical theories, is it going to be better for the larger group than it is for those few individuals? And that's where you have to kind of dig in with your study of ethics as you go through the book and you're reading these cases and you're asked to kind of apply ethical standards to it and ethical theory to it. Now, remember, this is all theory, it's ethical theory. By the time you get through it, you'll probably decide if what you've always felt your ethics apply, or if for some reason maybe you thought you felt one way and you actually fit another way. That's how ethics work when you're kind of learning that and you start going through the process of what would it be. Probably every one of you watching this fit into an ethical theory, maybe not one of the three that I've emphasized here with this PowerPoint: utilitarianism, libertarianism, or Rawlsian, but we all fit into them in some way. There are some that are based upon moral and principles of religious thought. Those are individual, just the same as any of those others. And whatever your individual thoughts and how it applies to you is what you have to kind of think about when you're making your answer. I cannot emphasize enough, there is not a right and wrong answer on my behalf. I'm not grading on whether or not I agree with you. When I grade these, I want to see that you can understand the ethical principles presented. You can see the case and go, okay, well, I see how this could be unethical based upon this and this and this. And maybe if someone's followed this ethical theory, it may not be that same. I want to make sure that you can do that. My whole goal is that you can present that in a way that you're showing me you understand what these ethics are. So let's get back into what some of the key issues that went into this. It's always that public versus private benefit. When we trigger the takings clause or eminent domain, it's always public and private benefit that are weighed against each other. When you own property and there is a need for that property, a true governmental need. Now, a true governmental need means that there is a purpose that will benefit society within it, and there is not another option that matches this to that extent. And so it's looking at it from that sense. You want to make sure that the governmental need truly is fitting into what it's designed for when it comes to them taking the property. The Supreme Court saw this and looked at it, and in a 5-4 decision decided that, okay, it fits public use or it fits public purpose. In your opinion, it may not. You don't have to agree with the Supreme Court in this. You don't have to agree with the city of New London. You don't have to agree with Keller. Just show me that you understand the ethics behind it and what those ethics mean. Property rights for homeowners and in general, your property, we protect those. We really want to make sure that those are protected because it's ours. If someone was to come to my home and say, I'm going to take your home just because I want it, I'm going to have a problem with that. All right, I'm going to have a big problem with that. This is where I live. This is where my family lives. We raised our children here. We bring our grandkids in here. There's a lot that goes into this. We're attached to this, not just as walls, but we're attached to it because of the history here. We're attached to it because of what it means to us as a family, the history of our family. For almost as long as my wife and I have been married, we've lived in this spot, with the exception of a month or two here and there where we lived in California. But we've lived right here in this same spot. When we came back from California, we came right back to the same spot because we own this. We came right back here. It holds a place with us. We've had our children's birthday parties here. Our grandchildren have played in the yard here. We have memories of them drawing on the sidewalk out in front of the place. So is those type of things that when eminent domain is instituted that we don't consider, we consider, we think about it taking the property from the person and what that means. The law doesn't take into consideration, and the takings clause doesn't fully take into consideration what memories are there, how many birthday cakes were cut and candles lit in the kitchen, how many movie nights with the family you sat and watched movies all gathered around the TV. It doesn't take those kind of things into consideration. And so when we think about the ethical theories behind it, those ethical theories, to a certain extent, look at that, but do not necessarily say they're looking at it, because they're looking at the value that that person holds in it. The governmental side of it looks at the value from just a monetary stance. They're not taking into consideration all those things that I talked about. And so when you look at this from an ethical standpoint, you look at it from a legal standpoint, those two do not gel completely. And so finding these case studies, I'm asking you to find where they do or do not and how you're basing that. This one's different than the first case study. They'll look at the Harvard case and the students that were hacking in or got a link to see where they ranked at and what their grades were and stuff, trying to get an upper hand. That was purely how you felt about it, and that one usually has some real clear thoughts about where it's at. This one, on the other hand, when we get to the second case study, it does cause you to have to dig in. On the first look, they're taking it to try to fix the economy. Okay. Well, then when we read a little bit more about Kello and the other homeowners, it is so hard to decide, okay, well, this is where they've been. This has been their property for so long. They've raised families here. Where do you get compensated for that? Can you be compensated for that? Is there the ability to be compensated for that? And if you think that no, you can't really be compensated for it, there's no way to compensate for that, then what theories, how do those legal theories stack up to that way of thinking? And so the ethics side of it allow us to go beyond what the legal side is. The legal side is always that this is what it says, this is what we have to do because this is what's been passed. The ethical side says, well, we need to take a look at this a little bit deeper and see what is going on. Is it morally acceptable to displace individuals for the sake of a broader economic benefit? How should justice be balanced? Some questions you could ask. Does the promise of job creation increase tax revenue outweigh personal loss of property? I don't normally share my opinion, but with that second one, that is so hard for me to say yes one way or the other way, because I understand the importance of jobs being in the area. I understand the importance of increased tax revenue to keep a town going. The town adjacent to where I live in the county where I live in Bradford County, Union County, just adjacent to us, their school system and the county in general are going through a very rough economic time. Their school system has been, the state of Florida is going to have to intervene to help them economically with what is going on with it. And so I understand the importance of that. From a business standpoint, I truly understand the importance of raising revenue. And we all understand that just as individuals who have bills to pay, who have groceries to buy, especially now, who have gas to put into, you have to buy, your gas to put into a car. And, we can all joke about how expensive everything is, but it's expensive because, well, that's just how things go up. Prices increase. I remember when gas first reached that dollar a gallon and everybody was just, in shock. But when we think about those and what is going on with that and how we have to weigh that from an ethical standpoint, not the legal standpoint. The legal standpoint says this is what it is. This is the takings clause. This is what they do. The Supreme Court expanded some definitions. That's all that was done. The ethical standpoint that we look at is maybe not quite the same. We have to look at it from what are these ethical theories and how do they apply? So, does the promise of job creation increase tax revenue outweigh personal loss of property? What do the ethics say about it? So, when we think about how this case works and what goes into this case, I want you to kind of look at that and dig into it and see what is going on with it. Okay, so that's the case. Now, what I want to do is spend a little bit of time, and we're not going to go through each one of these. I'm going to share this PowerPoint. It may already be there. I'm going to check to see, but I'm going to make sure this PowerPoint is there, and I'll link it in when I leak in this lecture and the announcement. But what I want to go through now is kind of spend some time talking about the case studies and how to get to them. All right. So when you do your case study and how you get to it, I'm going to open up, share the screen so I can get out of that. Go with me here as I go through this a little bit. So let's go through the steps of finding and opening a book. So when you get into Canvas, you open up Canvas, open up your modules, and go into, and since this one doesn't have it, I'll get that in there for you. But when you go into the modules, and for this one, module 2 is going to have your reading that will help you here. They're not numbered, but the ethics book are the ones listed under chapter reading. All right, chapter reading, the nature of morality, the normative theory of ethics, and then justice and economic distribution. That is chapter 3, and that's the one the case study comes out of. Well, make sure you're reading through these chapters, and you simply just click on the chapter, and it'll take you through Cengage. Now, it's going to load Cengage a little different for me than it would for you because I would have the professor version of it. But when you get into it, you'll see that you're in Mind Tap, and you're looking at what is going on with that. All right, so you'll see the book, and this is similar to how the book's going to look for you. So this is chapter 2, and you can go through it and pick that. There's that hacking into Harvard from the first case study. You can always find the chapters, go into those by going here to this spot. This is your table of contents. Gonna bring myself out of the way. Close out of that and go to any one of these, and you'll be able to find the table of contents, go through your book. All right, so make sure that you're getting into the book, you're seeing what it is. For those of you that reached out to me when you could not find it, that is the best option you had. Reach out to me so I can kind of walk you through that because it can be a little different. There are 2 books, and figure out which one is the right book. For the first case study, if you submitted the wrong case study, do not worry about it. I will grade that based upon the work you did for that case that you pulled up. There was a case that aligned similar to the numbers in the business law book. And so I will look at it from there. I think it had to do with Omega Corporation or something like that. But for the next one coming up, make sure you're following those steps and going through it and getting the right case. Because I will take points off now if you go in and use the wrong case. We're in our second one. You've had a chance to ask questions. This video will walk you through it. And if someone does ask, they'll be directed to this video to kind of follow up with that. All right, so I'm going to end this right here. And hopefully this answers some questions for you, gives you an idea of what the legal side and ethical side for that case is. It wasn't real deep as far as what we did, but hopefully it does help. If you have any questions, reach out to me. Until the next video, stay safe, study hard.